Hey everybody, and welcome to Don't Copy That Floppy, your weekly video game news podcast, broadcasting live 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/DCTF podcast. I'm your host, Lex, and I'm here with my co-host,
Chris Boudreau.
It is...
You messed me up there, Lex.
I did things in a slightly different order than I usually do.
I'm messing with my mind.
It is October 20th, a Friday. And we have a reasonable amount of video game news to talk about. Most of it is kind of related to all the other. There are a lot of big meaty stories instead of lots of little ones, which is, I think, what we've been doing more so lately. But we've
very serious news this week.
Yeah, kind of heavier meat and potatoes type, Tom Brokaw style news. But we're going to be talking about microtransactions in upcoming Star Wars games. Also, EA shutting down studios and what that means to other Star Wars games. Plus, more microtransaction news in the form of patents, followed by loot boxes. Who thinks they're bad? Apparently, the UK.
Uh-huh.
After that, we're going to get into some baffling moves by Sony and Valve's ongoing problem with its Steam store. We're going to top everything off with video games that just came out and video games that are about to come out. And let's jump right into it with Star Wars Battlefront 2. So this is a story from GameSpot from October 20th, today, and it is kind of a response to a story that's been going on for the last couple weeks since Star Wars Battlefront 2's beta started, in which the players discovered that Star Wars Battlefront 2 is pretty decisively a pay-to-win game. And it's disappointing. So this is, for those who aren't familiar, the idea of a pay-to-win game is something where there is some sort of advancement in the game or extra perks or things that you can buy to give yourself an edge competitively, and if you can buy them with real money, then the game is essentially pay to win, because you can pay real money once you're already in the game, after you've already paid the initial cost of purchasing it, to give yourself a competitive edge over all the other players. Star Wars Battlefront has always been a giant multiplayer game, so obviously it's a bigger deal than when something like this happens in, Shadow of War, which is a single-player game. So it's giving you an edge not only in the game, but over other people who are playing the game, and essentially forcing other people to shell out extra money so that they can be competitive within the environment. That's the worry.
That's the worry. That's the world now.
Unfortunately, it is the world now, especially EA's world. So
EA's world and Activision's world.
There's in Star Wars Battlefront 2, there's these things, the system called star cards, and the idea is that you can get what were they called? Supply crates, maybe? They're basically they're loot boxes.
Yeah, it's just another way to skin a cat.
Yeah. And you buy those with either real money or with
hoop dollars.
Yeah, with hoop dollars. I think it is an in-game currency, but you can also earn the loot boxes through play. It's just a lot more play than if you just purchased them. So you earn these supply crates, you open them up, they have a certain number of star cards. The star cards are things like weapons or abilities for your guys or your heroes or what have you. And you can equip them to your character that you're about to jump in and play with, and you can also get different levels of them that, have a greater percentage of the abilities. I think some of the things pointed out, which were particularly egregious, was Boba Fett, or as I like to call him, Robert A. Feet, has a specific ability where he...
Oh, that's good.
Where he can use his jetpack to fly up in the air and fire missiles. And while he's using that ability, he can have damage reduction. Now, if you use the regular the first level, like first tier of that ability, it's like 15 or 30% damage reduction, which is still quite a bit. But if you can level that up all the way to 4, it's 100% damage reduction. So you are invincible while using this ability.
That's fucking insane.
It's pretty crazy. And now parts of that, in terms of the percentages of how much of these cards help you, can kind of be forgiven in the sense that this is still a beta, and that is the time that they tweak stuff like that.
Yes.
So
that has been the response, the devil's advocate response.
Well, I think for that aspect of it, I'm actually fine with it. Yeah. In terms of abilities being overpowered. What I'm not fine with is the system that's obviously not going to be changed, which is that you're paying for these abilities that make your characters objectively better.
Yes.
And now, as I said, you can just play and earn the supply crates through that, but that's it's much easier for someone to go in and spend a whole lot of money day one. Get all that stuff, whereas it could take you weeks to get to the point where you have some of those things. And let's see, there was an interview that GameSpot did with, and this is actually funny and kind of sad, with Chris Matthews, apparently not the news person Chris Matthews, but art director of EA Motive, who are the team behind Battlefront 2's campaign, which is silly because the campaign mode is not the mode that people are upset about.
Right. He has nothing to do with these decisions.
No, nothing.
He's an art director, not a publisher.
Yeah. And I think they also talked to like the story head on the campaign mode as well, and he also has nothing to do with these decisions. The people kept asking him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I understand fans, unhappiness and their feedback, and that's okay, we get it. But in terms of changing things like this, I think you need to talk to DICE." Yeah, the people making the multiplayer element. And I'm like, yeah, they would be the people to actually interview GameSpot if you knew what you were doing.
Well, it's funny because they even went on to interview Mitch Dyer, who used to be a writer for IGN, which was strange when I was reading this. I was like, Mitch Dyer, what? But apparently he's a campaign writer for the single-player campaign, and he's like, yeah, DICE is listening to players' feedback. The beta exists for things like this, he said, to look at things like how are people responding to the balance and the maps and how's everything flows. What are people enjoying and not enjoying? What's working? What's not working? We'll take all that from the beta and start pumping it back in the game to improve it, because Battlefront 2 is a game that exists because of feedback from the fans. Couch co-op, single-player campaign, ellipses. These elements exist because people wanted them. But I think to DICE's credit shows that they're listening, and they do listen to feedback. And it's like, that's great! Why are you talking to one of the writers from the campaign?
Why is this guy the one saying that and not a DICE representative or an EA representative? And to be fair, in the article, they do put the quotes from the blog post that DICE published as their first response, which I think was last week, to people really coming down on them about this. And their response is really like a pretty hard dodge. They say the complete system is not in the beta and will continue to be tuned over time. Okay. They go on. I think one of the last things they say is, let's see. You have to earn the right to be able to upgrade star cards and unlock most weapons, they said. You can only upgrade or unlock them if you have reached a high enough rank, which is determined by playing the game. Now, this actually doesn't jive with some of the initial reporting that I had heard on this, which is, and maybe ranks and levels of your character are different, because I didn't play the beta, I don't exactly know, and I guess they are, judging by this, but when I was watching videos on this, it showed that whenever you upgraded a star card, or you got like a new star card or something and equipped it to your hero or your character, that would give that hero or character another level. So it was even more egregious because you were paying for like more aspects of the game. So by paying for these cards and then equipping them, you were also leveling up your character. And it might be that that's what they're referring to in rank and that they removed it, or rank is something you have as your player profile and then the characters level up separately from that. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, it's like, okay, so there's a little bit of a stopgap on this, kind of, but it's still very much a pay-to-win environment that they have created with this game.
Yeah, thus far. I will. I'm going to say this, that a lot of our stories today, I think, are really kind of a bit of a snapshot of where the industry's at right now.
Hmm.
For in different corners and in different angles and stuff. And I think one kind of through line that is common here is the a lot of companies are again, then they do this, I would say, in cycles, but they're seeing how much blood they can draw from players, and they'll suck your blood and they'll suck your blood and they'll suck your blood right up until you say, oh, fuck off, and then they're like, okay, now we know our limits, now we know how far we can go with this shit.
Hmm.
You know. And I think this is part of that, and I think this is a new way to use betas. You know, like, let's see how much bullshit the players will put up with in the beta. You know, like, and that way we can just get just that far, because they don't want to go over that line, because if they go over that line, then no one's going to buy the game and everyone's going to be pissed. But they want to just find out how much blood they can take from you, and I think they're using betas to try to figure that out with this one. It's got a little insidious, I think. But not as insidious as what Activision is trying to do.
No, we're gonna get to that story later, and man, that is like, ooh, it's
that's some supervillain shit, is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's good that they are like, yeah, here's a single player campaign, couch co-op, all that shit that people may or may not have asked for. But yeah, this is just it's another way to just draw out money, really.
Yep. And
that was actually something that I'll bring up a little bit later too. But it's something I wanted to ask you, is that, like, are games worth more than $60 now? Do they cost more to make than $60 per unit? And this is how we're basically paying that extra money to, to forward up the profits.
I think there is an interesting aspect to that argument.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a black and white issue, I would say.
Yeah.
But talking about EA and the horrible decisions that they make, they've just shut down Visceral Games.
Yeah, this was incredibly surprising.
So this happened October 17th. This was reported. We're looking at a Polygon story. But Visceral Games, if you don't know, they're the dudes behind Dead Space.
Yep.
And EA sort of gobbled them up. Maybe, was it before they even released the first Dead Space or after? I don't remember.
I can look. I'll stat check that.
But it was around that. I think it was around that time. I feel like it was probably beforehand, because they wanted to make this sort of high budget game and they needed the funding from EA to be able to do that.
Yes.
But we do know that what ended up happening with Dead Space and why the franchise sort of petered out after 3 titles is because in the 3rd title, it was all about microtransactions. It was very, very microtransaction heavy and very much a pay-to-win game. Mm-hmm. And people responded very negatively to that, and it hurt the franchise significantly in the franchise's sales, because back when that came out, which a few years ago, I want to say,
Dead Space 3 came out 2013.
Oh, okay, yeah.
First Dead Space came out in 2008, almost a decade ago.
Oof. The farther back in the past you go, the more negative people's responses were to microtransaction mechanics in games, because they weren't as widespread back then. So you could have a more minor franchise like Dead Space killed over something like that. Right.
That was like I was saying, that was one of those cycles when publishers were trying to push to see how much they could get away with, and they found that limit with microtransactions eventually.
So this is unfortunate, not only because this is a studio who knows how to make really good games,
yes,
but also because of the game that they were working on, which was a Star Wars project, and it was supposedly a linear story adventure game that was being run by Amy Hennig. Yeah, Amy Hennig, formerly of Naughty Dog.
Yep, the writer of the Uncharted games.
Yes, and I was super excited about it, because this was supposed to be the sort of what Star Wars 1313 was gonna be, until LucasArts got closed down and the production of it ended. So it was like, oh, we're still gonna get this really cool looking adventure story game that we weren't able to get before when they closed that studio, and now the studio that was working on that has been closed.
Yeah. This is this is a incredibly interesting thing. You have EA money you have the Star Wars license, and you have one of the most in-demand writers in the industry all working together, and the fucking thing crumbles. I think there's a lot of hot takes about this, and I'll get to those in a minute, but I think it's interesting that this was probably one of the most, it wasn't like the most anticipated title ever, but it was one that everyone had their eye on because of the circumstances surrounding it. It's like Visceral Games, Amy Hennig, EA, and Star Wars. It's like that's a full deck. That's a full hand of cards you got there. And yeah, they pulled the plug seemingly out of nowhere. The hot takes came in hot and heavy, Lex, around this one. And there was a piece written also on Polygon by Samit Sakar. And he was, I think, a little reactionary to this, saying that EA's Star Wars pivot, quote unquote, is a vote of no confidence in single player games. And it's like an op-ed kind of. And it basically goes on to talk about how is it possible that single player linear stories, single player linear games are no longer financially viable in the industry anymore, saying that, games as services are what everyone wants to make. And by games of services, I mean things like Destiny and, Call of Duty, anything with a long-running online aspect where they can continually sell you things instead of just a single story. And so what do you think of that, Lex? Do you think that the days of single-player linear games are going the way of the dodo?
No, not at all. That's silly. But
I think it's a little silly as well.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, they're going to live on in the indie market in a significant way. But
that's a big thing too, is that like the indies are never going to go away with that.
Yeah,
like there's always going to be a space for indie games of all flavors and colors.
But the original or the first Polygon article talks about how it seems like the reason why they did this was because of focus groups.
Yep.
And it was saying, oh, well, they had this game and they focus tested it to a bunch of players, and the players kept saying, oh, yeah, I mean, it's okay, but it's like a linear story game, and that's not really what I'm into. And they were saying, oh, well, we had so much feedback like that, we decided to just shelve the project or like try and radically transform it into something else. And I thought, I don't know, I kind of call bullshit on that.
I do too. And
yeah,
this is especially because there was Jason Schreier, who is a writer over at Kotaku, who regularly breaks stories. He's like the Tom Brokaw of the video game world, and he frequently has inside scoops. It's basically said he's like, I've been hearing about this, that this was going to happen, and it happened. And basically, he has some sources on this. Anonymous sources, obviously, and he hasn't written anything big about it yet, but when asked about it, he's like, my sources have told me that the game was shuttered mostly because it was completely off track and it just like it wasn't coming together, like from the development side of things. I more tend to believe that for a couple reasons. One, this game has been in development for almost 4 years and we've seen one little snippet of it. That's it. That is so not what EA does.
Yeah.
EA will show you something for 5 years in a row if they have stuff to show. The fact that we never saw anything from this game always had me on edge, where I was always like, that's not good. Like, why wouldn't you show stuff for this? So there's a lot of word out there that, this game just might have not been coming together. Like it might have, the team might not have been a fit for the writing, or the writing might not have been a fit for the team, whatever. And I think that's more likely. Another thing why I think that is likely, and please allow me to read the official statement from EA regarding the closing of Visceral. So this was written by Soderlund. What's his first name? The guy that runs EA.
Ooh, I'm blanking on that.
Patrick Soderlund.
Yeah.
So they made an official announcement as to this, and he said, and this is fucking corporate word salad if I've ever heard it.
Synergy.
Throughout the development process, we've been testing the game concepts with players, listening to the feedback about how they want to play, and closely track fundamental shifts in the marketplace, Soderlund said. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we need to pivot the design. We will maintain the stunning visuals, authenticity in the Star Wars universe, and focus on bringing a Star Wars story to life. Importantly, we are shifting the game to a broader experience that allows far more variety and player agency, leaning into the capabilities of our Frostbite engine and reimagining central elements to the game to give players a Star Wars adventure of greater depth and breadth to explore. Which is basically, I just said a bunch of stuff that means nothing, and they said a bunch of stuff that basically means nothing. I think so. A lot of people took this. Took this statement and they're like, oh, they canned it because they wanted to make it a Destiny game. They want to make it an Anthem game. You know, they want to make it a games of service game where they can sell loot boxes. Possibly, but I really think that this is cover up. I think this is them not wanting to say the game sucked and it wasn't coming together. I think that's what was actually happening, and I think it's a bad look for them if they just say, yeah, we just couldn't get our shit together and the game sucked, you know, especially after having Mass Effect Andromeda fail on them. I think having another big IP kind of crash, especially tied to Star Wars, would not be a good look for the company. I doubt that they want to put another game out, another sci-fi games as service game out there when they already have Anthem coming in like a year or two. That would be kind of weird to also have a Star Wars license like that right alongside it.
Yeah.
Do you think? That'd be kind of strange.
I think that kind of makes sense. I'm curious as to how much was Visceral working on the game and Amy Hennig working on them, and maybe those two entities synced pretty well, but then you constantly had EA coming in saying, hey, how do we add microtransactions to this thing you're making?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, especially if you consider Amy Hennig's pedigree at Naughty Dog, they're given, as far as I know, they're given pretty much free reign to do whatever they want. And Sony allows them to spend a whole dickload of money to make very compelling, you know, linear stories. It might have been quite a bit different at Visceral with EA kind of looming over.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
And considering how much influence we know EA exerted over Dead Space 3, I think that wouldn't surprise me if that was something that there were problems because of that kind of production overreach. But
right.
That's my theory on it. I think the idea that linear story-based games are going away is silly because of the Uncharted games. I mean,
right.
That Uncharted game did not come out a long time ago, and man, it was successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever you see a big company put a lot of time and effort into a game like that, you usually see sales do pretty darn well. I mean, would you put Last of Us into that category as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's a new Last of Us game coming out soon, and man, people are excited for that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's going to do really well.
Like Metal Gear Solid games always doing well, and whatever the hell Kojima's next thing is.
Whenever it happens, I'm sure it'll do well.
Whatever decade that occurs in.
Yeah.
But no, I think that the thing is the hot takes on the internet were, oh my god, linear single player. This is how I think this ties into the rest of this snapshot of the industry that we've basically have this week. Is that the loot box apocalypse, the loot boxalypse, which we should just have a segment called the loot boxalypse where we take all of our stories about loot boxes and just put it there inside of a box and throw it away and never talk about it again because I'm really sick about talking about loot boxes. But I think that in the greater loot boxalypse that's going on in the industry, people looked at this huge, almost too big to fail game. You know, like I said, EA money, Amy Hennig, Star Wars license. You know, people are like, holy shit, that's great. If they saw that failed, the hot takes were, oh my god, we're never going to get linear stories again. Everything's going to be loot boxes. This is the industry being destroyed. I think that's total. I think it's important to make sure that doesn't happen, but I also think it's a little bit unfounded panic. You're always going to have indies. You're always going to have Nintendo. And Sony doesn't seem too upset about making a bunch of having all their first-party studios make linear first-person games like God of War and, you know, everything Naughty Dog does. And like even like Spider-Man, I don't think that's a games as service game. I'm sure it'll have some online aspect, but, you know, that's everything.
Yeah.
So I think that this is one corner of this snapshot, this whole Visceral being closed thing. I think this is but I think that it is a little unconnected. I think this is EA being maybe even a little overprotective with their Star Wars license. Like the Star Wars license is a big deal that they have that. And maybe they were looking at that game for 3.5 years and they're just losing money on it. And they're like, it's not coming together. And we don't want to put out a shitty Star Wars game like this. We want to have like a premier product if we're going to do this. And maybe that's part of it too.
Perhaps. I will point out one last thing about this, which is that an update from the first Polygon article saying they asked about Amy Hennig's future at EA, and a representative for the company told Polygon, "We're in discussions with Amy about her next move." Oof. That sounds real bad.
That does. That really does.
So she's probably not going to be with EA anymore pretty soon.
Probably not. And
which also makes me think that it was creative differences, that she didn't want to work in that environment because they were constantly pressuring her to put out a product that she didn't want to put out.
It's a strong possibility. I mean, I'm sure we'll get the story eventually. Like it'll be Jason Schreier or Amy Hennig will say something herself, or somebody will leak some kind of thing.
Yeah.
It'll come eventually, and I'm interested to, just like with Kojima. It's like I think the more interesting thing is the story behind this thing, and I think we'll get it eventually. What happened here?
Yes. All right. So let's move from EA to Activision.
Fun some
stuff.
Mustache twirling crap here.
Oh yeah. So this is an article from October 19th from GameSpot, talking entitled "Why Activision's Microtransaction Patent Worries Us." So you know what patents are, viewers. No. But we found out this past week that Activision had filed one that was specifically for multiplayer microtransactions and a way to do this. So I'm going to try to sort of explain this as succinctly as I can. But the idea is, with the patent filed, that it's a system in which you go to play an online multiplayer game like Destiny 2. And you go in a competitive, like, player versus player mode of it. And the algorithm that has been put in place matches you with someone who has maybe better weapons, but certainly more kinds of items, weapons or armor, that it has also matched you as being interested in based on other stuff you've done in the game or other buying habits that you have. So it basically says, okay, we're going to take this thing that we think this player will want, and we will put them in a match that we know will have this thing to dangle it in front of the player. And it will also, and like I said, if these things aren't just cosmetic, if they give a numerical advantage to whoever has them, it means that it's intentionally putting the player in a match that they are more likely to lose because their opponent has this thing. And then as soon as the player leaves that match, they will instantly get an advertisement saying, "Hey, did you like that gun or armor piece that you just saw in that match? Here's how much it costs. Want to buy it?"
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is fucked up.
Yeah, this is really, like you said earlier, it's very insidious. It's like super shady, coercive marketing.
Yeah, it is. And this is, to be clear, this was a patent. This is not, for what we know, not in use in any of their games.
And they have, when they were asked about this, they were very quick to point out that this is not being currently used. It's not implemented in any games they currently have. But if they just filed the patent, then that would indicate that that's something they're looking to put into future games.
Sure. It would suggest that they already have worked on this algorithm to some extent, and they're looking to copyright the algorithm itself, which is also weird. Well, I guess it's probably common practice, but that also makes me think, like, are they going to try to sell this technology to other companies and double dip? But, like, it's a little fucked up. I think, let me get on the hot take horse, Lex. I think people are overreacting a little bit, just a little bit, because there's companies that do fucking file patents for every goddamn thing under the sun. A day doesn't go by when you hear about some wacky thing that Nintendo patent.
Now, that's a legitimate argument.
Yeah.
However, you're wrong because
Okay.
and I only say that
I respect your opinion,
yes,
which is wrong.
Yes. And I only say that because of all the stories we've been covering for the past several weeks and all the stories we're covering this week where it's just microtransactions are just ramping up and becoming a bigger and bigger deal, and companies are actively finding more and more ways to make money off of them and to push them further into games. I mean, there were stories, I don't even think we reported on it, but what was it, like Forza had this whole big controversy?
Oh, the whole Forza deal, yeah.
Yeah, a couple weeks back with that too. So in light of all that, them filing this patent now looks way worse. If this was more of an isolated incident, I would probably agree with you on that point that you made.
Right. Does it say GameSpot found out that they were the ones that found the patent?
It's GameSpot, so probably not.
Well, it says we recently learned that gaming giant Activision holds a patent for a system.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that I know that news sites kind of troll the patent, like the patent forums and shit, so that they, scanning for anything from any of the companies. So they might have found this. Got to pick up on this. So this is, as I was saying, we have this snapshot of the industry. This is another corner of it, and it's also part of the loot box ellipse. But this is, as I was saying, companies trying to find the limit. They're trying to find how much they can suck from you, how much blood they can draw before you slap their hand. This is, it's no surprise companies are meant to make profits and to please their shareholders. That's what companies do. If they have to make you happy as a byproduct of that, then that's fine. But they are always looking for ways to increase profits. Now, the fact this was found out makes it probable, I think, that we're not going to see it implemented, because this is going to just make them look real bad.
Yeah.
That being said, the average gamer, like the non-hardcore gamer, the person that doesn't have a weekly podcast about in-depth video game news, isn't going to know about this if it is implemented. They're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I do like that gun, and yeah, I want to give $5 for a loot crate."
Yeah, I think if no one had found out about this patent, the most that would have happened is they would release, I don't know, like Destiny 3 or something, and it would have had this algorithm in it, and after a certain amount of time of the game being out, like a couple weeks maybe, you would start seeing YouTubers saying, "Hey, we've been noticing this weird thing in the game," and they would start talking about it, and then maybe it would balloon from there.
Yeah, to a degree.
Yeah.
So this being the loot box ellipse, I do want to, I guess I ramble about this and I talk about this shit because it helps it sort it out in my own mind. And sorry, my microphone's kind of falling down, so I have to make sure that doesn't happen. Right, so these companies are really trying to find the line. And I was trying to think of other times when this was happening, and the one that I thought of was not that long ago. What's the word I'm looking for? They're not plans. They were monthly the passes, the DLC passes.
Oh,
what are they called?
Yeah. Like season pass stuff?
Season passes, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, that was, you don't see, I think people still do it, but not that much anymore. But that was a huge thing, and people were really freaking out. And I was thinking about the game Evolve, which basically crashed and burned because of all of its shady DLC and season pass bullshit. And I think that was the line. That was a line that they found, okay, that's how far we can go. Let's take it back just a little bit, and that's where we are. We're seeing this with loot boxes. This is all coming to a head. I was trying to find this particular article. I couldn't find it, but basically I wanted to find out how much Activision Blizzard makes in in-game content sales. I couldn't find the one from this year, but there was an article that I found that says Activision Blizzard made over $3.6 billion in in-game content sales. So that means loot boxes and other skins and shit like that. And I can't remember where I was reading it, but there was something that was saying they're over $6 billion in in-game content sales this year. So if you ever wonder why loot boxes are coming in all your games, that's why.
Yeah.
Everyone looked at Hearthstone, everyone looked at Overwatch and the other Activision games, and they're like, holy fuck, we want to make $6 billion a year on top of the game. And that's what they're doing. this brings me to, I guess, the question that I asked you earlier about are games do games cost more than $60 a piece? Because basically games, AAA games, have stayed at a static $60 price point for well over a decade, right? I think, or around a decade, probably more. And that's not adjusting for inflation or anything like that, or the fact that video games are getting progressively more expensive to make. So I was thinking, I was like, is this just the way to pay the other end of that money? Is it, and they found that they can make more of it by people spending small amounts? Or is it them, or are they fine with the $60 and they want to make money on top of that? What do you think?
I think one way we can find out for sure, and I don't have that in front of me, but is to look at the quarterly profits from these big companies.
Right.
The ones that
to see how much they make on top.
Yeah, because if they're making record-breaking profits on top, then obviously they don't need to be doing the loot boxes. It's just they just want that extra. And I think, like it's interesting because I think that games probably do cost a little more than $60 currently, at least a AAA title.
Right.
But and I think, who was this? I think Jim Sterling was saying this, and I think it's a reasonable point, that a lot of the things that are being given to us through AAA games as these $60 titles are things we didn't ask for and don't necessarily need. So this constant push to have the most cutting edge graphics and the biggest maps, like for sandbox things, it's like, oh my gosh, is this how big is this compared to Skyrim? Is it 10 times the size of Skyrim? It better be, or it won't sell. I'm like,
but
no.
Who cares if there's nothing in it?
Yeah, who cares if there's nothing in it? It needs to be bigger. We need to spend more time and make it even bigger. And there's a lot of things like that happen with AAA games where I'm just like, but you don't need to spend time and money on that. Like, if you just scaled that stuff back, I'm sure your game would be just as good and it would be cheaper to produce. Right.
Yeah. And, there'd be less, it would take long, because games take longer to make, definitely, because of this. And, 4K games cost more to make. I think that if there were a little bit of scaling back there, it might help. But I also think it's just if games, like, I was thinking about the alternative, like if no one bought loot boxes ever, and all these, well, not all these because it's not every company, but basically the big third party companies like EA, Activision, Blizzard, turn to everyone and they're like, okay, no one's buying loot boxes, well, we have to charge you $80 a game now. Like that's the price of a AAA game is $80. Would that be better or worse? Like, if they're like, it's $80, you get everything. You get all what would be DLC is just in the game. You get all the skins. You get all the stuff.
I think in many ways it would be a lot better. But I also think that it would be interesting because it would create a slightly different environment. It would probably create an environment that is more akin to Hollywood blockbusters, where we would see less AAA titles happen. Because the idea would be, maybe not that they want to increase the price, but that all of the onus is on being a smash hit bestseller game. Right. So there would only be like really obnoxious, like homogenized shooter games. Like,
that's all there is now anyway.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you can make an argument that that's all there is now. There isn't very much variety, but I would worry that if they kept the price $60 and removed all the loot boxes, you would see even less variety because companies would be, and that wouldn't be necessarily merited, but I think executives would make this decision that, like, oh, we can't take any chances because our margin of error is too slim.
Right. Yeah, you'd end up with the Marvel universe.
Yes.
Or Transformers movies.
Oh, those Transformers movies, man.
I know, but they make money.
It's just disgusting.
Yeah. So, anyways, this whole Activision thing, I wonder, like, what part, like, Activision is obviously known for doing skeezy shit, like, and kind of untowards things. What's the CEO's name? I always forget.
I don't remember the names of any of these people.
He's a kind of a skeezy fucker, it seems. But they do kind of weird, like, exploitive kind of stuff, and this is pretty pinnacle among them. I think that this is probably one of the worst, most egregious things about the loot boxalypse yet that I've seen, in terms of, like I said, just insidiousness and kind of weirdness. But it's good that people catch this kind of stuff, I guess, and try to take them down a peg, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think so. It's it's also interesting just that Blizzard really kicked this all off by having with Hearthstone and Overwatch. But if you look at the way they do loot boxes, it's really not like that exploitive, or at least it's it's as little exploitation as you can get out of the loot box system, because there's a lot of people that I think rightly so make the argument that it really hurts people with addictive personalities or younger kids who get access to their parents' credit cards, stuff like that. And that's bad. But even so, you still look at the examples that they set with Hearthstone, which is a free game where you can choose to purchase packs of cards, or Overwatch.
And that like buying packs in a card collecting game plays into the mechanics of the game.
Yeah,
like, that's how card collecting games work.
Yeah, or Overwatch, which is a paid game, although not a $60 game, right? Isn't it like a $40 game?
I think it's like 40.
Yeah. And yes, there are loot boxes that they want you to pay for, but everything in those loot boxes is cosmetic.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that they were like, hey, if you do these things with loot boxes, not only will your community not get mad at you, but you'll also make butt tons of money. And these other companies have said, but what if we did things that did make the community mad at us for the possibility of even more money? And I like the idea of Blizzard just being like, but it's already going to make you butt tons of money. Look at how much money we're making. And like EA saying, yeah, but that's, I wouldn't be satisfied with just billions of dollars.
I need 3 new jets this year.
Yeah. And that's really the most disappointing thing about all of this, is just the greed that is so obvious.
Yep. And everyone's just fucking copying off Blizzard. I mean, like, it goes to show you just how important Blizzard is to the industry. How important they've been in so many different ways to the industry when it comes to MMOs or, shit. What was I was gonna say? What's that Vikings game they made like 1,000 years ago?
Oh shoot! What was that? Was it just called the Lost Vikings or something?
Lost Vikings. Yeah, real important to the industry, that one.
Oh yeah.
No, yeah, like Hearthstone. There were definitely like online collectible card games before, but that's the one that everyone knows.
It is super interesting that Blizzard set the standard for MMOs, and then it set the standard for card games, and then it set the standard for arena shooters. But when
and isometric RPGs with Diablo.
And
RTS
games. Yeah. But it's interesting because when it set the standard for the MMO for Warcraft, you saw all these companies copying them, and then none of them could pull it off.
Nope.
And you basically like don't see MMOs anymore.
Nope.
Like
big money cut. I mean, those things take a lot of money to operate, and they're big risk. And that was the thing, is that was another way of like of these publishers trying to figure out where the limit was, how much money they could take from you, because they found out really quickly that if someone's paying $13 a month to play one game, they're probably not going to pay another $13 a month to play another one. But
it is interesting because it's like, oh, they tried to do that and they set the standard for that, and then everyone tried to copy them and failed, and then they set the standard for loot boxes, and now everyone's trying to copy them again, but because it's an easier thing to emulate, they're succeeding in certain ways.
Right. Yeah, because like you take a look at, definitely, like you take a look at, like you said, with MMOs, like those are very complicated, intricate machines, that require a lot of thought and effort and design. Whereas loot boxes is just it's running a casino, it's running a pull slot machine, where it's just like it's not that hard to do. It's not that hard to recreate that. That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it goes to show you just how fucking good of designers Blizzard are. That they can do all this shit and actually pull it off, and not make it seem really skeezy.
Yeah. So
they even hold on. I'm sorry. One last thing, but they even set the standard for not even just loot boxes, but the art and the psychology behind even opening them, like the fucking the clickiness and the poppiness and like the anticipation for opening a Hearthstone pack is a fucking psychological science all to itself. Like you hit it, it's like whoop, and it like blows up, and you're like whoa, and the card backs are to you, so you have to flip them individually, so you get the satisfaction of clicking them. And you have this fucking dwarf yelling "Rare!" every time that you get one and shit. Like, it's like there's so much design and polish just in opening those fucking loot packs, it's amazing that they are going to ruin the industry because they came up with that.
In America, people have the ESRB. I think it was the other week. The ESRB was looking into the idea of loot boxes and how people had brought it forward. I think it was Total Biscuit had said, like, hey, if loot boxes are in these games and they're basically gambling, then maybe these games should have a mature rating if they're going to include loot boxes.
Yeah,
which actually sounds like a perfectly reasonable argument.
Or like a warning sticker or something.
Yeah. So the ESRB looked into it, and the ESRB basically said, "Oh, well, I mean, you don't get money out the other end of it. You pay money in, and then you get a random product, but part of that random product is not more money. So that means we can't classify it as gambling. So whatever, they can just keep doing it, whatever."
Yeah.
And that was very disappointing. But in the United Kingdom, they are taking a different stance to it. So
they are.
We have an article from Eurogamer from the 20th about what the UK can learn from the Far East's battle with loot boxes. So the idea here is that there has been a petition to the United Kingdom government to try to regulate these loot boxes and have gambling laws applied to them. And the way the UK government works is if you get 10,000 signatures on your petition, then they will officially look at it and try and craft some law around it, something like that.
Yeah, start drafting some legislature.
Yeah. And it easily got the signatures it needed, so they're looking into it now. And that's actually in itself very interesting, because it tells you that the gaming community is obviously like desperate to have these things regulated. Like, people care a lot about this.
I have concerns about that though, but continue.
No, I think it is. It's definitely, it can be a risky situation. But
yeah,
the idea here is that there's this part of the UK called the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
Which, if you ever saw the Netflix made for Netflix movie Mindhorn, you'll know everything you need to know about the Isle of Man.
I still need to watch that.
Oh my gosh, it's really funny. But no, it's like its own separate little thing, sort of, in terms of governmental policy. I don't know exactly why, but I don't know. UK.
Oh, they're all wacky over there.
Yeah.
In the UK.
And they have much stricter gambling laws and have actually looked into applying them to loot boxes, and I think have done so. So the greater UK government is sort of looking towards that example. I think there's a quote in here, and I can't remember exactly what it is because this article is very long.
Yes.
I want to find...
Well, Eurogamer. Eurogamer is... They're really good... They publish really good stuff, but they are wordy.
Yeah. No, they do really good reporting.
They do.
There's basically something in here that talks about how it's... They... No, I can't find it, man. Okay, it's a thing where they talk about how the idea is that there are... you pay money in, but then you get either money or a product that has value to the player within the game, that has a real money value.
Right.
And that's their differentiation and sort of how it is different from the way the ESRB thought of it. And I think that's really the linchpin there, is the idea that no, you're not getting money out of these, but you're getting you have a chance of getting something that has real value within the game that you would pay money for. And I think that's a good standard to look at it from. I think that's important.
It is. Yeah. A good way to look at it. This is all... I think it's great that people can, perhaps trust their government enough to come forward and be like, we have concerns. Please take care of it. But I don't want the government anywhere near the video game industry. Have we not? Do none of us remember the 90s?
Well, that's the thing, though. But look at what happened when the government got involved with the video game industry in the 90s.
It was a shit show.
It was, that's true. But out of the other end of it, we got the ESRB. And then
does what?
It puts...
Who fucking follows the ESRB?
So, the ESRB is... I actually think is, super good. I think they're fantastic. My problem is parents.
Yeah.
Because the ESRB said, like, okay, we're going to slap ratings on these games. And for the most part, I think the rating system is good. And actually really helpful. I think the way that it breaks down is that you have parents that don't bother to look at it, which still baffles me, because you have a movie rating system which works exactly the same way, and parents do pay attention to that in terms of what movies that they'll let their children rent. But for some reason, when the exact same system is implemented on a video game, they just don't pay attention to it at all.
It's a smaller box, and no one says rated R started Friday.
But so when I look at the ESRB, I actually think it is a valuable asset to the gaming industry. I think it's really good in terms of the sort of service that it provides and letting us know where these games fall in terms of who should be playing them. But then I get really mad at parents.
I say, Lex.
Yes, but then I get really mad at parents because they don't pay attention to it.
Right,
So no, when I look at the 90s, I say, okay, the 90s were a shit show. That is certainly true. And there's all sorts of times where legislators tried to get rid of violent games entirely because they said, oh, well, it leads to people being more violent. And I'm like, yes, that was
Columbine
bad.
Shootings.
Yeah.
They played Doom, so they shut up a school.
Yes. So that was all horrible, obviously.
It took us like fucking over a decade to figure out that was bullshit.
Yes. But when you look at the actual laws that got put in place through that debate, I think most of those laws ended up being beneficial. Because a bunch of people argued for crazy stuff, but then they didn't succeed in their argument.
Right. But the thing is, it gets bogged down because I look at something like Australia and the amount of bullshit regulation they have on their games. Like, first of all, their games cost like $150 or something like that. But they also, every single game has to go through this government regulation where if there are certain things, and it's pretty broad and pretty like, it can be pretty innocuous things in a game, that the game becomes not rated, which basically means it's banned from the country. Mm-hmm. And pretty much when there's any kind of governmental censorship of art, in my opinion, I don't like it. I look at this, that probably won't happen with this, but like, I don't like giving the government an inch. You know what I mean? When it comes to the arts, basically, because they're all old. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, they're all old, and they don't know what video. They don't know the nuances here. They don't understand, like, oh, well, this kind of loot box is going to be okay and that one's not. They don't have, like, an intuition for it, so they're going to have to apply outdated or, like, non-referential material and laws to it to try to make sense to the other old people that are making the laws. And you're going to end up with something that doesn't end up benefiting the gamer. I think, like, we obviously have a little bit of different opinion on this, but in my opinion, I want the government as far away from the video game industry and most arts in general, unless they're like making endowments for the arts. I want them as far away from it as humanly possible.
I understand
but
that.
I do like that this article has a picture of gachapons.
Yes, it does. One of the things this article talks about is the way that the Japanese and the Chinese governments have tried to regulate this stuff as well to limited success, and how they're saying, like, oh, the UK government should look at the way these other governments have tried to do it in terms of their legislation, which is a smart move, and I hope they do. Because they wouldn't be the first one trying to regulate stuff like this. And it's important to learn from from other regulatory attempts that have been made. But I think to what you were saying, you know, there needs the way I feel about it is there needs to be some kind of middle ground. Like, there's a lot of stuff in Australia that's crazy. I mean, back when Hotline Miami 2 came out, there was a bunch of controversy about that and how it couldn't be released in Australia because of some of the graphic violence and sexual stuff that happens in it. And on the one hand,
it's a fucked up game, but it's a piece of art.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, on the one hand, I looked at the game and I'm like, I mean, that is really messed up, and I kind of understand why someone would say, like, no, we're not going to allow that, because it's, like, extremely graphic. But on the other hand, not banning it entirely is not the way to go. Having something like a mature or adult-only rating, so it can still be sold, but people understand how intense it is. Right. I think that's fair. But I think that it's something that I'm more for right now, more regulation, just because if you look at the way the US handles video game stuff, there's just like nothing. There's so little of any kind of government oversight on it, and we keep seeing these stories about loot boxes, and I'm like, man, they're really this is like really destructive, like bad capitalism happening here, and I want something. I just need something.
This is the proof. This is the testing ground of like the industry is getting close to something that a lot of people would argue is gambling, and that is manipulative. And like when we just like the fucking Activision story you read is manipulative and fucked up, and it'll be once again this snapshot of the industry lurching towards a new future that we have this week. This is another corner of it. Is like, what is the government's or world government's involvement in these kind of things? Like with the Chinese, they demand that the odds of loot boxes are broadcast, that they're not kept secret, so that there is no RN Jesus. It is RN Ministry of Culture, and like. I think that's another picture of this industry kind of making these big, wide swathing turns is to what degree we'll have regulation or not. I say less. I hope for less. But
well, so we are running a little low on time, so I want to just blitz through these next two stories.
Well, those are pretty much the. Oh, besides the what else do we have?
We had Sony and we have Steam.
All right. So our snapshot of the loot box lips is over.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the way. I just like on all those stories, all kind of being similarly interconnected. I think that the game industry is a big lurching monster, and it takes a long time to lift a leg and move another leg. And I think we're seeing a potential crossroads where the game industry might go down one path or another. And I think these are all interesting flashpoints that show that.
Yeah. So Sony and Sony Music.
Yeah, this is a short one. Fucking bizarre one. So Sony Music Entertainment is turning into and this is from Gama Sutra, by the way. Sony Music Entertainment is turning into a multi-platform games publisher and intends to bring a selection of indie titles to platforms including the Nintendo Switch and the PC, which is new for Sony.
So this is confusing since Sony has a game publisher already.
Right. So this is the first of all, the name of the publishing arm sucks. The company has formed a new games publishing label called Unties to quote-unquote penetrate the ever-expanding video game market with indie games. And their first one that they're going to be doing is a small game called Tiny Metal, which actually looks pretty cool. It's basically looks like Advance Wars. And it'll be going to PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. And there's some other ones there. I wanted to see...
This is baffling to me because not only do they already have a company to an arm to do this with, but you have like, I might understand it if the idea of Sony or PlayStation brand was tainted in some way, and then the greater parent company would say, oh, okay, well, we want to still put out stuff, but we want to distance ourselves. But as we know, the Sony brand has been winning, winning the console war, and they're putting out great stuff. So why...
They're like the most profitable arm of Sony.
Yeah, like why would you try to distance yourself from them? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And here, like the thing is, like being really knowledgeable, having a part of a company that is really, really knowledgeable about the publishing aspects of video games is really hard. And it took Sony a long time to get there. And why would you do this is the most strained decision, because it's like you already have that. You have the PlayStation division. Like they know what they're doing. They've been doing a good job for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's extra strange to me because the guy that's in charge of Sony as a whole is Kazurai, who used to be the head of the PlayStation division. He got promoted up into CEO of the whole company. So the fact that he's like, oh yeah, Sony Music, which is not doing well, by the way. Sony Music is not doing well because the kind of the change from CDs to MP3s to streaming, and the fact that he would be like, oh sure, yeah, like Sony Music, they probably know the intricacies of publishing independent games. Like what?
This certainly doesn't have the potential to backfire and cost us a bunch of money.
Right. And I heard this from someone else, but they were saying, like, I imagine Sean Layden waking up, going to work, opening up his email and reading this, and he's just like, what the fuck? Like, who the fuck decided this? Like, yeah, it's just a baffling move. I don't know what the impetus was. I don't know what the idea was behind this. And Unties is horrible. To be fair, This seems to be more focused on Japanese publishing, so maybe it's a thing there. I don't know.
And I think there was there was a story I was reading, I think, out of Japan about how the mobile markets in Japan, and I think also China and Asia sort of in general, are just like ever expanding and just making even more money than they used to, and it's crazy. So if they're making stuff, I mean, they're not making stuff for mobile markets, unless you consider the Switch that sort of a little bit. But I guess maybe they're thinking there's more to tap into in Asian markets than that they could be doing, and maybe they're right.
Or maybe they are playing some three-dimensional chess here. Like, maybe they're like, we are doing so well, we want to do better, and we can't, like, the PlayStation unit can't rightly start publishing our games on like PC and Switch. They're like, but if we do a shell company, because this is I read this in another article regarding this, that they used to publish games back on the SNES through the ImageSoft brand, the Sony ImageSoft brand.
Oh.
And that was while they were making the PlayStation, the first one. But they still wanted to double dip into that big market, so they had a publishing arm with a different name. They had a shell company, essentially. This may be a little bit of that, because one thing that we didn't cover because there was bigger news, but like the Switch is doing fucking amazingly well.
Oh yeah,
and is going to be doing incredibly even better during the holiday season. They're probably seeing that and they're like, we definitely want to dip there. Mm-hmm. Like, we can't dip into the Xbox, but we can dip into Switch, like, and make a little money there. And if that's the case, I can't blame them.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so interesting. I mean, I think that's a pretty, a likely explanation, an explanation that makes sense.
Right.
And hopefully that is what they're doing. Hopefully.
Right, because I don't think Kasurai is a dumb man.
No.
So.
But last story, just going to go through this real quick because we're massively out of time. But the ongoing saga of the Steam store and how it just can't seem to stop all of this shovelware from
like
coming
the ending
on
of
there.
Akira.
Yeah.
Just endlessly growing.
It's we learned 2 days ago, so the 18th, through PC Gamer, that apparently its new releases are expected to reach 6,000 this year. Now, this is bad because Steam Greenlight, a little bit backstory, Steam Greenlight was a thing, and a lot of people blamed it because people were abusing the system and putting lots of shovelware. They would make bots that would vote in games, and that's why they would get up there, and then they would abuse the trading card system to make money, and blah, 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 and that was bad. And then so after years and years of that not working, Steam finally said, okay, we'll ditch that. We'll put in Steam Direct. In Steam Direct, you don't have audience voting. Instead, there is a monetary fee to put your app up. And we supposedly will review each app. But that's obviously not what's happening because the number of games released has only continued to climb after Direct was introduced this past spring. So obviously, that did not have the intended effect. And as we reported several weeks ago, there was recently Steam took down what was like 200 like obvious shovelware asset flip games. Yeah. But the fact that it's still growing at this rate means that them taking down 200 was just like a drop in the bucket, and there is so much more that needs to be taken down. And I'm starting to think the only way they're going to fix this is either by curating heavily, like involving a ton of Steam employees to look through everything, or getting rid of the Steam trading card system.
Or just letting it go. Just saying, fuck it, everything's fair play.
I guess they could do that, but no one's going to be happy with them if they do that.
No.
And if they and either way, it's going to cost them money. If they ditch the trading card system, then they don't get to make any percentage revenue off of that. But that will definitely stop all of these asset flip games from coming out because those games won't have a way to make money. And if they decide they're going to look through every game that comes out to make sure it's not an asset flip, they're going to have to hire a ton of people to do that.
Yeah.
So either way, the solution is they need to spend more money on this.
Right.
And I really have no sympathy for them because I know how much money they're making on Steam.
They are some rich bitches, to be sure.
So it's getting to the point where this is ludicrous. Their algorithms are not working in terms of trying to mitigate stuff like this. They just really need to get in there and do something. They need to get in there and spend some money to fix this problem.
Come on, Gabe.
It's more and more obvious that's just what's going to fix this. That's what they need to do, and they just really don't want to do it.
Yeah. Come on, Gabe. Come down from your high horse. Fix this thing.
Get out of your golden palace and fix this.
Shave your golden amazing beard.
So, that is it for our main news, and now we're going to talk about games that just came out.
Games.
Yeah, what did just come out? WWE 2K18. Get excited.
Yay.
That came out on the 17th. Actually, Life is Strange Before the Storm, Episode 2, came out on the 19th. Very cool.
I love Life is Strange.
Let's see, we had on the today.
Legitimately, that wasn't a joke.
No, it's a really good game franchise. Today we had Fire Emblem Warriors come out, which is Dynasty Warriors with Fire Emblem characters.
Yeah, another. What do they call those Musou games?
Yeah, just kill me now. I freaking hate that genre so much. But that came out on the Nintendo Switch and the 3DS. Also, Siberia.
What?
An interesting little Nintendo Switch indie.
Siberia came out for the adventure game Siberia?
Yeah.
Really? That game, the first one came out like 2002.
Oh, I don't know.
They must have re-upped that for Nintendo. Man, fucking, I want a Switch.
Dude, I have a Switch.
Games.
They're great.
I know you do. There's so many interesting games coming out for
Yes. Big deal coming out on the 24th. Destiny 2 is coming out for Windows. Now you can finally no-scope with your mouse. Get excited.
Right.
Also, biggest game all year. Just Dance 2018 coming out.
Just Dance
for all platforms, including the Wii. Not just the Wii U and the Switch, but also the Wii.
The Wii. I can't believe those games still make money. It's like
I'm sure they're really easy to make, right?
Probably.
They're probably really cheap to make. But
there's always that spot in the Ubisoft conference every E3 where they gotta just do a little bit of dancing.
Sometimes I think they spend more on their showpiece for the conference than they spend on that entire game.
Probably.
But and then on the 27th, there's actually 3 really big titles coming out, but we'll talk about those next week because the 27th is when we're doing our next show.
Yeah, This Is the Police. I heard that game's good. Also coming on the Switch.
Oh yeah, I heard that game is cool. So
and we got Yomawari Midnight Shadows, of course.
Obviously, yeah. For the PS Vita.
Coming to the Vita. Vita lives.
Vita means life. But that was it. That was the whole show. Thanks for watching and or listening. This has been Don't Copy That Floppy. You can check us out on chipit.net for our show archive. You can also find us on iTunes for our show archive. If you'd like to go on there and give us a rating and review, that would be awesome. Please do so. Also, if you have lots of money and want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon and give us some money every week or every month, and you get access to fun monthly bonus content, which Dan and I are actually going to be recording tomorrow. We're going to talk all about
Dan.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Dan's on the bonus content all the time now.
No.
That's
steal him from my basement.
That's where he is. Yeah. No. He actually. I shouldn't have told you. He has a little broadcast station that he set up that he hides from you under his cot, and is able to get a little bit of broadcasting out unbeknownst to his captors.
We'll take care of that.
Yes. Get rid of that. If you just need to have his mouth duct taped at all times instead of only some of the time.
Need better duct tape.
But and if you want to find us on social media, you can find us pretty much everywhere by searching Don't Copy That Floppy Podcast, or specifically on Twitter at DCTF Podcast. So check us out, follow us, we'd appreciate it. And until next time, Chris, what do people have to remember?
Would the senior senator from Massachusetts please not copy that floppy?